the dead. Let's get into it. Dr. Greg Hess, Chief Medical Examiner of Pima County in Tucson, Arizona, points to the outdoor cooler capacity 115 human bodies, the extra one they had to build in 2005 after the flood of migrant remains began to overwhelm his office. We ran out of room, he said. Pima County, one of the 22 counties adjacent to the Mexican border, has long been ground zero for migrants who die trying to cross into the United States. The centralized position of its office, responsible for 3 of Arizona's 4 border areas, means that more migrant remains have come through the Pima County office of the medical examiner than anywhere else in the state. Jose Inez Ortiz Aguillon, the man found by the Aguilas, was processed here. He was just one of more than 3,000 suspected U.S. border crossers, documented by this office alone since the year 2000. In the 1990s, we'd have less than 20 a year. In 2000, that jumped to about 75, Hess says. Our busiest single year was 2010. We had 222 remains recovered that year. This enormous influx not only stretched the morgue capacity to its limits, but also left the office with a quandary. Federal law said nothing about what they should do with these bodies, and official record keeping was non-existent. There's no federal law that dictates what states should do with the bodies of migrants who die on the border. Arizona statute requires that the Office of the Medical Examiner be notified when remains of an unidentified person is found. But that's it, Hess says. There's really no way to track these types of deaths unless you're keeping your own internal numbers. That's why, as the bodies poured in, unidentified, and taking up space, the Office of the Medical Examiner tasked itself with rigorously documenting the identities of those found and assembled a DNA database. In doing so, they were able to chronicle, for the first time, a historic wave of death at the border. Identification from the start was the main challenge. If people are not found right away, they can become very decomposed and skeletal remains very quickly. You lose a lot of information, Hess says. So, when we do examinations on people, we essentially make a profile. Is it a man or a woman? How tall are they? What do they look like? And do they have any identifying marks or scars or tattoos? Medical examiners also look to see if the migrants carried any personal effects that might provide a clue to their identity. There's a picture showing the medical examiner, like with these lockers with all of people's personal items found on them in plastic bags. That's where the property room comes in. At first glance, the metal lockers look just like the ones you'd find in an American high school, except each one holds a year's worth of plastic pouches, streaked with the desert dirt, filled with the unmistakable scent of decay, and stuffed with belongings chosen to provide a semblance of comfort on a long trip to a new life. Prayer cards, photographs of children, hair clips, reading glasses with a missing lens. These belongings hold valuable clues that could reunite remains with loved ones. Says Robin Reineck, I don't know, the co-founder and executive director of the nonprofit Calibri Center for Human Rights. Calibri works with the Pima County Office of the Medical Examiner, collecting detailed missing persons reports for people who disappeared while crossing the U.S.-Mexico border, and DNA profiles from family members desperate to locate their loved ones. shows like hundreds of unidentified cases, like files on filing cabinet shelves at this human rights center, the Calibri Center. They currently have reports for more than 3,000 people. When we take missing reports, we don't treat that as a legal law enforcement document. We treat that as a scientific document and humanitarian document, Reineke says. We're recording every detail that the family can remember about the person, about what happened, about what size pants they wore, what size shoes, anything that the family can remember. Belongings found in the desert are not only useful in identifying the missing, but also have a tremendous meaning to devastated families. We work with families in crisis, families grieving unthinkable losses. The items also help the family to heal, Reineke adds. To see his prayer card, to see his wallet, to see his glasses, to see her ring, her earrings, her scrunchie, her Bible, and then to hold those items and do their best to try to be with that person in that moment when they couldn't be with them and they left the world, when they left the world. When skeletal remains are found with no belongings, DNA becomes the only chance of identification. Since 2016, Calibri has taken DNA samples from more than 583 individual family members in hopes of finding answers in the Pima office's database of more than 1,000 samples. Oh God. Sorry, there's like a slideshow of all their belongings, driver's licenses that actually have people's faces on them, so they know who these belong to, but I guess they don't find their families. Really sad. So far, they have helped families identify 45 loved ones, but the relentless human toll is hard for Reineke. I'm an optimistic person, but at this point I'm pessimistic that we're going to be able to identify everyone who has died here. I keep waiting for the moment when the American public realizes we've allowed something really ugly to unfold. Oh, we realized it's just what, like, if you're already voting for the people who want to stop this, like, it's like, what else do you do? Or people realize and literally don't care and want these people to die because of racism or being brainwashed. It's like, it's sickening. America's got a lot of issues. Part 3, from pauper's graveyard to proper burials. The pauper's graveyard at Terrace Park Cemetery in Holtville, California, some 15 miles from the Mexican border, is at the back, behind the manicured lawns, with the marble headstones and fresh carnation stems wilting in the hairdryer heat. It's home to several large rattlesnakes and more than 500 unmarked graves. A large warning notice signposts the snakes. The rows of paupers' graves, marked by numbered bricks, read Jane Doe and John Doe. And then they have like a row number. This one that they have a picture of says row 11 and then row dash 11 dash B, so I mean it's organized. Okay. The 3-acre dirt lot was opened in 1994, the same year that Operation Gatekeeper policies were introduced. How convenient. Half of the men, women, and children buried here are unidentified. Of those, most are migrants who died attempting to cross into the United States. Usually, this site is closed off to the public, chained shut. Burial stopped here in 2009 after officials realized cremation at only $850 a body was more cost-effective for taxpayers than the roughly $2,300 it costs to bury someone. Oh yes, that's the main concern. Okay. After cremation, ashes were scattered at sea. Why? Who thought of that? Like, what? Just keep them? Okay, what? I guess they have to store them. There's no room. I don't know. Weird. Okay. It's not funny, but it's so weird. Oh my God. crosses. But now, a decade since the last pauper's grave was dug here, the remains of unidentified border crossers are coming back to Terrace Park. Except this time, their cremated bodies aren't buried at the back. Instead, a new policy is ensuring remains are placed in an endowed area of the cemetery that is marked and accessible to the public. Okay. This new policy is the work of Imperial County Public Administrator Rosie Blankenship. For years, it has been her job to break the news to any migrant families who came calling about the fate of their loved ones. If the coroner can't identify a migrant's body within 30 days, the remains are sent to her department, Blankenship says. Her office then typically waits about 30 days before moving forward with cremation. However, by the time a family might call, it was often too late. When they would come to me and say, "I'd like to claim my loved one," I would have to tell them, "Oh, I'm sorry, we scattered their ashes at sea," she says. There was no closure for the family, and I thought, okay, we've got to change that. Yeah, we do. Blankenship's first visit to the dirt lot at Terrace Park Cemetery left an indelible impression. As soon as I crossed those gates and looked at the area in which our descendants were buried, my heart just broke, she said. Changing the cemetery policy was one of the first things on her to-do list, Blankenship says. To be able to bury them in the endowed area, a much more beautiful place. I mean, that was the right way to go, she says. Why hadn't it been thought of before? I don't know. Because nobody cared. Which is why, on a blazing hot April morning, as 3 volunteers strum guitars and softly sing the Catholic hymn, Entre tus manos, Blankenship reads out a list of 17 names, most of them simply John Doe, with an estimated time of death. Volunteers take turns laying single red roses into an open grave. Her voice quivers as she reads the names aloud. Why it's quivering too? No more unidentified migrant or identified person has to be buried in the back, she says. They too have the honors of being buried in the front with all the rest of us. 17 people are interred during the ceremony. Not all of them were migrants. Some were homeless and others simply locals who went unclaimed after their death. We bid them farewell in a very respectful and dignified way, and at the end of the day, I can look back and say we did well. We did well for them, Blankenship says. And that gives me great pleasure to know that their farewell was a grand adios. After the ceremony, a crowd files solemnly through the gate into the pauper's graveyard, winding their way around the shallow graves to lay homemade crosses. A Catholic priest recites a prayer in Spanish. As the freeway across the dirt fields rumbles with the sound of Border Patrol cars and trucks of goods on their way to Mexico, the crosses read, "No olvidado," not forgotten. I highly recommend that you watch the videos accompanying this article because it really shows you how, as even a private citizen, not a Border Patrol agent, a police officer, an FBI person, like as regular citizens, not involved in law enforcement or medical or anything like that, or politics, these people like the border angels and the men who are collecting the bodies, these are just citizens who